Before we start the oil change, let's take a tour and find out what we're dealing with. On this particular framed flat track motorcycle with the Wood-Rotax engine, we're going to have the oil up here in a tank integral in the frame. This is a dry sump engine, so we will have to get the oil from the tank down to the engine, and it comes down from this line here, circulates through the engine, and is pumped back up through this line here. So we'll take off the oil line here coming down at the engine. It's pretty messy, so we'll look at that here in a minute. The filter on this particular engine is behind this cover, so we'll have to remove the chain guard and the oil filter cover. And then the dry sump down underneath has a couple of oil ports, and it just depends on what type of frame you have as to which one you remove. The framed flat track motorcycle with a modern motocross engine will have the oil contained all within itself, so it doesn't require a separate tank like this one does. Many high-performance engines, in addition to having a paper oil filter, will come equipped with a screen or even two screens. This particular engine does have a screen in the sump area. I'm familiar with how that sort of fills up over what period of time, and we won't need to service that today. If you haven't looked at yours ever, you probably need to. With framed flat track racing motorcycles being what they are, the particulars of each individual oil change procedure are going to vary depending on how the bike was put together. This particular one here has an automotive style spring clamp here on the oil line, and then it is zip tied to the frame here. So I'm going to remove this zip tie here, and then I'm going to pull this clamp forward and then move the hose back slightly, but not all the way. The reason I'm doing this is because I've learned the hard way that I can make a big mess. If I try to pull this hose through the belt cover port here, this clamp gets stuck in here, and then the oil tank proceeds to empty itself all over the engine. That's just not the kind of mess that I'm looking for right now. So, learning from my mistakes, pull the hose back and grab a hold of this clamp here, slide it forward there so I don't have to pull the hose with the clamp attached. Part I dread, because no matter how I practice this, this always makes a mess. So I might try another yet vain attempt to save myself a hassle, but really, this just never works. So I'll go ahead and pop this hose off, and I've got my drain pan in position. There we go. And you can see it's now draining. I'll take my 5mm hex head here and go ahead and remove this chain guard. Again, with my 5mm hex head, I'll remove the cover for the oil filter and get ready for another mess. This particular oil drain is a 6mm hex. Make sure I get the washer off with it so I don't lose that. It's got a magnet in the end here that collects a bunch of clutch material, the black stuff, and then a little bit of metal flakes on it. Go ahead and clean that off. Used to really keep an eye on how much was on there, but really, I can't really tell that much of a difference from oil change to oil change. But if anything crazy happens, I suppose there would be a difference. This particular motorcycle does always have clutch problems, just not enough clutch for what we do. All right, so that's cleaned up. Here's our new filter. It's been soaking in the oil for a while. Pop this old one out, and we'll be ready to put the new one in. Gently grab hold of the edge there. And I'll go ahead and cut this one open for inspection, see if there's anything funny in there. I go ahead and inspect in here in the cases, make sure there's nothing strange going on. Thing looks good. In the old days, there used to be a loose O-ring type of gasket. Now they seem to be integral with the filter. Maybe I remember incorrectly. Maybe somebody will remind me. Whatever the case is, double check to make the O-ring is there and it's lubricated because we made a mess of it earlier. So we're good to go. Kind of just pops in right there. And then we'll put the cover back on. Go ahead and inspect the cover at this time. Make sure that the rubber O-ring's in place and is in good condition. Clean everything up. Put the cover back on. Off camera, I gave the drain plug a good rinsing, and we'll go ahead and reinstall that. Wouldn't be a bad idea to safety wire that, so I'll do that too. Safety wire pliers. Pull that in tension it is. Go ahead and get that secured something forward on the engine. For this particular motorcycle, I definitely recommend cleaning out behind the belt cover really well, because you drug oil back there and it will just create a big old wad of gooey dirt. Not very factory. I'll position my hose clamp here on the aluminum fitting. Put the hose back in position, and we're not going to secure it because we're going to burp the line after we get the tank filled. Keep the engine guys happy. For another mess when we burp this line, let's put the rag there. So I filled up the oil tank in the frame with oil. I thought about talking about oil. Actually, I didn't think about talking about oil. I know better than talking about oil. That'll just open a can of worms. Everybody's got their favorite oil and nobody will be swayed. So I'll save that for another day when I'm more ready for arguing. All right, so I'll go ahead and burp this line. See that there? Just gonna run this until I get a little bit of oil coming out. Make sure I've got the line full, and I do. Here's my evidence. Go ahead and secure that line. Factory tip for this video. A professional racing mechanic finds himself in the position to use zip ties, and generally they build the bike so they don't have to. But let's say that they have to. They're probably going to use high-end stuff. This is a Tie Wrap brand, TY-RAP. These have metal locks in them. They're thin, strong, they just look really nice. If you look at a professionally prepared motorcycle, you will never see this head. These will be hidden. So we definitely would not put this around this oil line here. This oil line sits here in that little piece. Just needs just a little bit of tension to keep it from moving out, getting into something. So what we're going to do is we're going to use a tie wrap for that. And when we put this on, we're going to clock this portion of the zip tie back around so you don't see it. And we're going to use flush cutters to nip the end of this off so there's no sharp edges and it looks really tight and clean. These cutters here are flush cuts. You can see how the angle of that tool is completely flush. Unlike standard cutters, diagonal cutters that look like this, that actually have a V in them. I'll go ahead and cut this with standard cutters and we'll see what it looks like. Now this does not have any real pressure on it. We don't want to kink the line. It's just holding it into that metal tab. So I'll go ahead and cut this with regular cutters. And then you're going to see hanging off there, if you can see that, if you can see that. That's not factory. Let's fix that with the flush cutters. Come in here with the flush cuts. Now let's get that look. Yeah, buddy, that's factory right there. We'll go ahead and clock this back around so we don't see that. That's probably a little too loose. How do I adjust it? I'll go ahead and push down on here. Give me a little cut. There we go. If you have a long series of zip ties on a line or something like that, you'll see that they're all clocked in the same position, and this portion of the zip tie will be back around where you can't see it. Just a nice, clean look. And those little things add up. Doesn't seem like that big of a deal on one, but if the whole motorcycle looks like that, it's really cheap, easy way to have a super clean, tight motorcycle. So there you go, factory tip. I think I'm done with this oil change. But before I'm convinced of that, I go back through and I check everything. Make sure that the oil filter cover is tight, the line is secure and tight, out of the way and secure with the zip tie. The oil drain is tight and safety wired. I've filled it with oil and verified that with a visual check up here in the tank. Now I'm going to take my remote starter and I'm going to spin the engine over with the remote starter for a bit to prime the pump. Ignition's off, of course. Now I'll hook the ignition up, pop it off, and check in the oil tank to make sure that the oil return is pumping oil back. Adjust our levels, and we're done.